Have a good meeting.
Thank you, Mark. This is Gary Lamel, the chairman. I will go ahead and call to order the September 17th, 2020 Commission meeting on disabilities and special needs. We'd like to thank everybody who's joining us online. We just ask everybody as we go through this, since we are a little bit more spread out, to remember to speak up. In particular, when we're making motions and seconds today, in order to assist with making sure the minutes are accurate. When you make a motion, if you could just state your name at the end of the motion, so moved, Gary, or second, say second, Gary, just so that that's as clear as possible, particularly with those of us who are wearing masks more, because that might not show up as clearly with the mask. Any questions before we get started? Anything else from the administrative side? Okay, all right. I would call on Commissioner Blackwood to go ahead and read the notice of meeting statement, please.
The meeting notice announcing the date, time, and place of September 17th, 2020 Commission meeting was distributed September 15th, 2020 to appropriate media and other groups or individuals who have requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs Central Administrative Office and on the website. The public has been notified that accommodations such as interpreters, mobility assistance, or other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs if requested in advance.
Thank you. The next item would be the adoption of the proposed agenda, which is on tab 1 of your book, and I think there's also some loose copies that provided at the front. At this time, does anybody have any changes, amendments, or modifications of the proposed agenda? Seeing none, would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Barry, aye.
We have a second.
I'll second, Dr. Rawlington.
Thank you. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes unanimously. Next item, I would call upon Commissioner Malford for the invocation.
Dear Lord, we come to you here today as humbly as we know how, as we know that as humble as we can be, is more likely you will hear our prayers. And we ask that you would help us to help people with disabilities and to be mindful of their needs along with the needs of the taxpayers of the state. We would ask that you would be with us today and keep us safe throughout the storm that you have chosen to come our way. And we pray for each person's help as we get through this COVID virus. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Thank you. The next item on tab 2 of your packets is the approval of the August 20th, 2020 Commission meeting minutes. Hopefully everybody had a chance to look at that. Does anybody have any changes, amendments, or modifications of the minutes as proposed? Seeing none, would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Aaron, I move. Stephanie Rawlington.
Do we have a second?
Second, Blackwood.
All right, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, the minutes are approved unanimously. Next item on the agenda is the commissioners' update. Any commissioners have an update that they want to present at this time?
Yeah, I just wanted to say something real quick,
Commissioner Malphurs.
if you don't mind. I just wanted to make a statement regarding our last, one of the public comments that we had last month. I just wanted to say that it brought me to a story that I wanted to tell. And it is that there's a man that I knew that was with the Board of Disabilities that I was on for 25 years and 12 years that I was chairman of it. And he was a person that worked for us from 10 years he started, his first 10 years was in 1994, whenever he took a job with one of the house, as one of the house people. And he told me many times that he didn't do it for the money, he did it because he wanted to help people. And he was promoted to a job coach about 3 years later, this is back in about 2007. And when he was promoted to a job coach in our county, the landscaping crews ended up being the top producing landscaping crew in the state, we're told, or close to it, back in 2007. He was with us for 13 years in the agency and resigned because of some differences with the executive director. But I wanted to bring us to the point of what the executive director said last month, which is that she thought that some people did not make living wages. And I think the living wage is a very relative term, and it depends on whether you're an executive or whether you work as a nursing home employee. But as to what a living wage is, but in my opinion, we do pay living wages, and I'm very proud of the benefits that people receive because of it. And I just think that if anybody does not think that we pay a living wage, they're free to work somewhere else. But I'm more thankful for those that do it not for the money, but for the help that they do for people with disabilities. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Rawlinson.
this is Ms. Robinson. I attended the coalition meeting via the internet right the day after our last meeting. And it was a great informational meeting for me, met a lot of folks, and I just appreciate them including us, and I encourage you all to attend those if possible.
Any further updates? All right, seeing none, we'll go on to the next item, public input. With regard to public input for this meeting, we did not receive any requests for public input. I would just remind those who are observing that we do have a system in place, even though we're doing remote meetings, and we're not having as many people come in to the central office as we did, and we're not having an audience like we used to. There still is a system in place for public input. And of course, we encourage anyone who feels the need to address us to please take advantage of that system. The next item on the agenda is the Finance and Audit. It would be Commission Committee business, particularly starting with the Finance and Audit Committee. Tab 3, the fiscal year 2022 state budget request. And we recognize Committee Chairman Blackwood. Give us an update on that.
Thanks. So we had our Finance and Audit Committee meeting last week, I believe, or beginning of this week. Yeah, I think it was Monday. And the agency presented the 2020 state budget request to us, because at the end of every year in September, basically DVS has to turn in our budget request for the following year. And so the DVS input the budget request out for input and comment. There were some comments on case management rate, which of course we don't set that rate, but that was shared with us during our committee meeting. And the budget was basically for 2022 reprioritized a little bit. And the one that was presented to us in our meeting Monday was about $1 million less than the year before. And the budget that we have today on tab 3 was slightly amended with an additional request from Greenwood Genetics to add in $750,000. So technically that makes our budget look like we're not below $1 million less than the year before, but I just wanted to bring attention that we did approve the budget on Monday as submitted, and technically I think we would need a second today, but since it was changed, I don't know if we need to, treat this differently, because what we approved Monday is not what we're looking at today.
So that's a caution, we'll go through that process again. So the change, I understand, is solely the Greenwood request. Everything that came from our agency is the same as what was discussed in committee.
Yes, I believe that Mary said she was gonna check one number.
Yeah.
Was it
It was number 6.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
did you see any difference that we need to look at, or
No,
was it fine?
what you see is fine.
Okay, all right, she was gonna check a number that was in that item, so no changes in terms of what the agency provided to us. Great.
So at this point then, in order to get discussion going, Commissioner Blackwood, are you making a motion with regard to the budget request that's submitted today?
Yes,
What is that motion?
motion is to approve it as submitted.
Okay. Do we have a second to that motion to begin discussion?
Second, David Thomas.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. All right, questions about the budget request, the 2021-22 fiscal year budget request?
And Chris is online if we need to have some questions answered, so.
Anyone have any questions? We're gonna get all this money without any question, right?
It should be very familiar to you. This is, but, you know, we've changed the priority because we know that DHHS has already raised rates. So that had to become a higher priority for us to make sure we can be able to match that, to be able to pay that.
I guess I'll just add that I think everyone in this room was on that committee meeting except you and Commissioner Thomas. So we have a pretty lengthy discussion and lots of explanations on reasonings for things, and so.
Except for about Greenwood Genetics, I just wanted to say that it becomes increasingly imperative that we find out more details about what they do with our money, but that's, I have to say.
So technically, it's not our money. It's their money that we have to put in our budget because the way that.
That 750 is passed through?
Yes.
Okay, well, then
Yes.
okay, sorry, I've already.
Yeah, no, in the past, we've had some other, concerns about Greenwood. But this budget is totally passed through, correct?
Okay, well, then, forget I said anything, sorry.
No, it's a legitimate point. It's always been
Yeah.
something that's tacked onto our request.
Yeah.
Makes our request look a little bit different, but there's also politics involved.
I mean, the other thing that also kind of stood out to me from our discussions on Monday was that 16 million, maybe 16.4 million is state funds. Everything else is federal Medicaid match in that budget of 47,700,000. So approximately 16 million is what.
Anything else? Chris, anything from your side that we need to talk about before we vote on this one?
Not that I'm aware of, as long as everyone's clear on, why we did what we did, and if you don't have any questions on, input solicited and so forth, I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Then we'll call for a vote on this. All in favor of the budget request as presented, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Let the record reflect that motion passed unanimously. Next item is the state-owned facilities conveyance project. That is tab 4 in our packets. Again, you recognize Commissioner Blackwood.
So during our meeting Monday, we kind of revisited this the issue of the state-owned provider-operated facilities. The motion basically from Monday's meeting was to approve that the facilities move forward in transitioning away from the agency and to the providers. This was already kind of voted on from a policy standpoint, that this would happen, but we just talked about that we were the agency basically said that they were going to submit, or they have submitted based on a September 11th deadline to the state fiscal accountability office, I believe. What's it stand for? What's the acronym?
State Fiscal Accountability Authority, SFA, SFAA.
Basically, we made a motion to, move forward with, moving the facilities to the providers. And, so I guess for the commission meeting, we just need a second of what we brought over, in terms of, approving that, during the committee meeting, and.
If there haven't been any modifications to the motion, then we treat coming out of committee as both a motion and a second, essentially. It's already approved.
As a second.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Simply because
one
the
thing
name
that
of
we
the committee.
did want to, I guess put on the record was, there were several facilities that might have some, deferred maintenance that, is kind of outstanding from the years, through the years that DDSN probably should have corrected at that time, but didn't. And now that the facility is going into the ownership of the provider, the agency is, feeling like they might have some expenses to cover some of those maintenance, deferred maintenance. They're going to take them on as an as-needed basis when they come up. And we, as a committee, voted on having any request for maintenance approved by the finance committee on an as-needed basis when they come up. And so that was pretty much our discussion, and our recommendation, I guess, to the commission.
All right. Again, coming out of committee, we'll treat that as both a motion and a second, so open it up for further discussion at this time with regard to the motion to approve the conveyance of the properties with the provision for deferred maintenance to be addressed by the finance committee.
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Very good, Robin, and Gary as well.
That was all Robin. I take no credit for that one. All right.
Okay.
Without further discussion, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, let the record reflect that that motion passed unanimously. Next item is the Band B&I project update.
Okay. I was looking to see, we were presented with a few options, I believe, during our committee meeting, and.
Robin,
No,
Yeah.
Robin.
Okay, yeah, not
I
that
think,
one.
I think this one has to do with our target date of January 1,
Okay, good, just making sure.
versus the recoupment for day program closures. So I just want to make sure that was clear because that keeps getting confused even at our office.
Okay. So the agency brought to the committee, that they recommended, that we move the target date from October 1st, 2020 to, January 1, 2021. They pretty much shared with us their need for the extension of the flipping the bands, to kind of allow for more actually public comment, not more because I don't think it's been opened up yet, but they are planning to open it up for public comment, and they just want to take time to really make this change due to the significance of it, due to all the changes that it would bring about for providers. So they just shared with us the adjustment to the scheduling. They didn't want to set a deadline, but they wanted to state a target date, so that so that they have the time to make this change and do it right. So that's really my update on that. I don't know if anyone had anything else to add to that update, Chris, but that was
Yeah, the only point I would make is that we have reached out to providers to ask for volunteers to participate in a work group for this. And we have I think it's about 10 executive directors / finance directors that have indicated they'd like to participate and be part of the review process as we look at rates and the proper way to transition this. And I have solicited feedback as to their availability, and I think I've heard back from everyone at this point. Maybe yesterday, the last participant had responded to my poll. And so we will be setting up a host or a series of events where we will bring these folks to the table and allow them to have direct input to how we accomplish this.
If I may, in addition, we have had boards, financial managers reach out to us and request assistance in analyzing their current situation, especially as they lean very heavily on those Band Bs and Is to cover other expenses. So between the input from providers as well as more of a deep analysis of current situation, if these providers get us closer to a switch that would not destabilize anybody.
Just keep in mind, when it comes to destabilization, that we can give loans to people. And that uses the providers, and that's the way in which we handle stabilization and safety nets and all those sorts of things. Because we have a loan position in place, and there's no ambiguity about whether they have to pay it back, or we as a commission can decide whether they would have to pay it back. It could be a forgivable loan if they did the things that we asked them to do to make their finances in order.
Right, and what we have found that we have been able to help people stabilize pretty quickly when we do that deep dive. If we don't do that analysis first, then the loan will have to be given again and again and again. So you got to fix the problem. You can't just, and I want to get us closer to what that safety net number needs to be. I want it to be a real number, not just a guess. So if we think we need to put a safety net in place, we don't over or under fund that.
And Robin, I think that's the terminology I think he used was target date versus deadline. So what we're adjusting here is the target date, not the deadline that we put in place, right?
I think once we're ready to give a thumbs up, we say deadline. I don't want to get people confused.
Can we get an update on whether this is gonna be a deadline then? Because I think
It will be.
the majority of the commission wants this to be a deadline date of December 31st. I mean, I think it's fairly clear. I mean, we don't need to take a vote for this minute, but I think it's fairly clear that the majority of the commission wants it to be a deadline date of December 31st. We don't want to go beyond December 31st to make free service. Fee for service, well, I can get more into it later.
I think that, just be talking personally, yeah, that's the target, but we also don't want to do it in a situation where we're not ready. I mean, that to me is the bottom line. And that's why I think target dates is, yeah.
This has been going on since 2012. We just have to get moving.
Yeah. I think the difference is we're seeing real movement. I mean,
It might have been talked about since 2012, but Commissioner Malfris, there really wasn't any true movement as far as analysis, and we talked about it, yes, we did, but more of the talk was from the provider world than actually BDSM and doing the analysis to move that needle forward. And the more we kind of peel back that onion layers, we find more layers, and so we got to make sure it's correct. I want this to work. I want it to work for everybody, but most of all, I want it to work for the individuals that we support. That ultimately is always got to be the bottom line.
Chairman, let me ask a question.
Absolutely.
Procedurally, when we set the date of, that we set, was that not a commission vote that we set the date?
it was.
Well, that's not a target, that's a date.
But I think if we go back and read.
Well, I don't mean, excuse me,
Okay, sorry.
I'm asking a procedural question. Now, the commission voted, that's the vote. Unless we change the vote, that's what will happen.
Right.
I mean, that's the end of the story. If the commission wants to make a change, then Mary needs to be back in here. We need to do a special meeting and say, aha, we've run into serious problems. This is what it is. Commission, please give us an extra 15 days. Give us an extra 30 days. But it's not that's the date. And everybody needs to know that unless the commission changes it. Each individual's got another vote that they can make if the staff says so. But there's not a but. That's the date, Mr. Chairman. Now, if you want to correct that, please correct it now. Otherwise, everybody needs to understand it's not Mickey Mousing around about, well, maybe, but possibly it would. No, we have voted on this. What was it, a May vote? What was
Yes,
the
sir.
May that the commission?
Yes, and we said at that time that if we moved it beyond December 31st, that it would be a written report that we would vote on at that time.
Well, okay, then there's a procedure in place.
That's right.
So, but unless that report is coming forth with, everybody needs to understand that that is what is going to happen.
Right, but I think what we're talking about here is we had a target date initially for getting started before that, right?
Well,
We're moving
well,
that.
I was asking about what you had said. You had moved, it might be because I'm in the back of the room.
Sorry.
All right, because I thought you said that the December date, that is the end of December, was the target. That's the date that we have set for the change, right? And I'm repeating myself.
Yeah, and there, again, there's sort of a difference between what we've been calling the target date to getting things started, which was a little bit different than the deadline. I think what we're talking about with this, and correct me if I'm wrong, is moving the target date to the deadline date. Because we had the target date, we talked about getting this started in October.
In October, that's
Right.
right.
And we said, all right, we're giving ourselves additional time for that target start to that deadline of December 31st, January 1, whatever,
Well, does the chairman disagree? This is a procedural question.
Yeah.
I'm asking, I guess I'm raising a point of order. And the point of order is, we cannot speak in terms, and staff cannot speak in terms of something that would sort of morph the thing out some kind of way, unless they come back with this report and we vote.
As
Is
far
that
as,
correct? Am I correct on that?
with regard to, I think what we're talking about are two different things here.
It could.
The deadline date is not, again, correct, Rob, I'm looking back at you because this came out of committee. We're not talking about changing the deadline date. What we're talking about changing here is our target date, because again, the target date was before the deadline date, right? October was our target date. Am I wrong about that? That's what we talked about. But we had given ourselves that latitude to switch it back to that December 31st, January 1 date.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
But we have not given ourselves any latitude to go beyond that.
No, and I don't think this motion says that either, right?
No, but I mean.
Well, yeah, well, sort of, but I mean, that's what we're trying to correct now, because I am saying that it should be December 31st, period, unless there's a written report and we vote on it again and we change it.
Right.
But I don't believe it should be changed, and I don't believe it, and we're not gonna destabilize anybody in this structure without, because we can give loans to anybody, that's why I brought that back up again, to anybody, and we need to keep in mind that when we were, then in April, or April, I think it was, when the head of HHS came to our, and was kind enough to come into this room when I wasn't able to be here, and talk to us about fee for service, he said that the number one problem that we have as an agency is not being on fee for service. It is a band system of payments. And they give us 65 to 70% of the money that we receive. So we need to keep in mind that they're not gonna bail us out, and we need to get to fee for service. And what we're talking about fee for service is only 40% of the agency anyway. We still got another 60% to go after December 31st, if we get to December 31st. So what we're saying is, what I'm trying to say as a commission is we understand that this will be December 31st, will be the date for the band Bs and Is to leave. And that unless that is changed for some emergency or some specific reason that we cannot foresee right now, that is the date, and that is what we are striving for, and that's what we expect this commission to do. That's what we expect this agency to do as a commission. Because we voted, and that's why that I'm not asking that we make it before December 31st, because the commission has voted. And when the commission votes, the commission needs to stick with what they vote for. Thank you.
Well, Chairman, could we finish with the chair lady's, was she going to say I don't wanna put words in her
Yeah.
mouth, but I don't want we'd be voting on something that is contrary
Right.
and is contradicting the May vote.
Right.
What does it do? What?
So the recommendation by the agency was, in our meeting on Monday, was to move a target date of October 1 to December 31st. We didn't talk about deadlines in that meeting.
No, we didn't, but the report
So-
that we voted on in May does talk about the deadline. And it does say that we have a deadline of December 31st, unless it is moved by report from the agency.
So you're chairman.
I know what that says in May. I was instrumental in what it says, and I know exactly what it says, and I have a copy of it right here.
Chairman, to clarify on my point of order.
Yep.
To clarify, your motion that you're bringing before the commission does not change the deadline. Is that correct?
No, it doesn't, but if that's the way that when we voted on May, I didn't have that in front of me when we talked, in our committee meeting. And the only reason I, ponder over the word deadline is that, the agency specifically said, we don't want to set a deadline. So I don't really know,
Well, that's what I'm trying to change right now. That's what I'm trying to change. I'm trying to make it from a projected date to a deadline date of December 31st. That's what I'm trying to
And just for the record, before I call on Commissioner Rawlinson, we've had a lot of conversation going on. It's been mostly Commissioner Thomas, Commissioner Malfris, Commissioner Blackwood, just so we know all the voices. Commissioner Rawlinson.
Okay, sorry.
For those of us that are new, can someone explain the difference in the deadline and the target date? I mean, what is the difference? in those two items?
I can speak to that if you would like me to.
Go ahead, Chris.
So I think that the point we're trying to make is, and I agree entirely with what Mr. Malfris and Senator Mr. Thomas has said here. The thing I think that Mary's trying to convey is we don't want to approach January 1 as the final date such that we end up cutting corners and rolling out a structure that doesn't actually work and set us up for success, and actually could potentially leave money on the table because we are working jointly with HHS to adjust some rates so that we're not fully state funding rate adjustments. And so there's a lot at play here that let's say we do approach January 1, but it really still is not advisable. I think our thing is, and what I agree with entirely, is we would have to come back before you all as a body and inform you and bring you up to speed as to what issues we're seeing and see if you agree that we should move the goal line again or not. But pending that type of situation, yes, January 1 is the final date that y'all have approved as a body that we can even consider at this point.
And I think what we're talking about here is we'd hope to have it in place in October. That's clearly not, we're clearly not positioned that. We had built in an additional quarter of latitude to keep on working on it. And if we're not gonna be ready by the December 31 date, we need to have another vote on it.
And could we say that the report would be here at least by December, by the end of November, so
I
that
would
we can have an evaluation?
Yeah, I think we have to have it at least by the November meeting. So, I mean, staff needs to be aware, if they're gonna be asking for that date to change, we need to have that report, but no later than November meeting. My person. Commissioner Miller.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think one of the other things that, if I heard correctly, is that this COVID has thrown a monkey wrench into the equation. And so the thought was, you don't want to leave any money off the table that should come our way. So that deadline date could possibly change if Mark and finance folks come back and say, hey, there's some money sitting over here that we won't be able to get by the deadline date, and we need to have another meeting to make the necessary adjustments. So that's just good business.
Yeah, and it would be subject to the vote. I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
That's right, and if there's money on the table, that's a different matter, but I mean, we just have to talk about that when the time gets closer. But I mean, the date just keeps moving, and it's just, I mean, I was very disappointed we couldn't do it by October 31st, I mean, October 1st, but I understand that things happen, but the December 31st is what I wanted to get across, and those that were not here in May, they don't understand, unless they watch the meeting, the back and forth we had, and I was thankful for what happened in May, and I was thankful for the cooperation I received in May, but I'm just trying to hold us to the May vote that we made, is all I'm trying to do.
The only thing that I'll add, Mr. Chairman, I do understand budget, and I understand that you need money to be able to operate successfully. Now, I'm not confused about that.
Right.
And if there's money because of this COVID situation, none of us expected that. It arrived on us, and it has upset and changed the entire equation. So we have to take those things into consideration.
I'm gonna, if I recognize Mary, I'll go back to you.
The motion was, it's the intent of the commission, the DDSN, to convert the current capitated band Bs and Is to a fee-for-service model by January 2021. However, provided upon recommendation of staff, that date may be moved at the discretion of the commission to a date later in the second half of the fiscal year, June 30, 2021, to get it done within this fiscal year. The issue we're having is time. Because of COVID, we can't, it is so much easier to go out to a provider, put eyes on a provider, to discover staffing patterns and things so you can tell somebody if you're spending too much here or there. I'm doing it by having people send me files, and it's very difficult and time consuming. When I can walk into a building within an hour, kind of get the lay of the land, but going through files, it's not as easy. So since we are just starting to be able to get back out there into the provider world, to go in because their COVID numbers are down and we can actually go back out, we have lost time. And you consider we've been doing this since March. So we told y'all that we could do this by October 1. We're saying it's not happening. We want you, I don't even have to be a motion. We're moving it to, we're moving it to January 1 because we know October 1 is not feasible. We will come back to you if we think that the January 1 is a problem, and we will tell you why. But that's really all we're asking. And I use the word target. Well, we just said bye, I mean, however you want to do it, it's not that we don't have the will to do this, we do. We just have the will to do it correctly. So, I mean, that's all, I think that this is more of a notification, and we ask for the commission's buy-in, as we discussed before, so that providers know that we're doing this in conjunction with the commission's will. That's basically what it comes down to. But I have no compunction about coming back to you in November to say we can or we cannot do it. I want you to know where we are. So that's what we'll do.
I would just ask that
I'll come back to you, Barry. Commissioner Thomas.
As part of what the director was reading, I have read a couple of times the action that we took in May. To me, it seems very clear, and of course we can make a change. Of course we can. That's the point I'm trying to. I might vote for a change, even though I would love to see this thing implemented, now. But if it can't be done for legitimate, valid reasons that the commission finds to be compelling, well, that's fine. That's fine. We give it another 30 days or 60 days or whatever. But it's coming, and the commission makes the decision on it, and we can't find ourselves using words like, we hope that this, or something like that. No, there's a deadline on it. The deadline is what a deadline means. That's the date that it goes into effect. The staff can come back with a written, and that's in the motion. And I think we put that in there in May to make sure that it was not just verbal back and forth, that we had written reasons as part of the record for why this was being delayed, and then the commission votes on it as a group, majority wins, one way or the other, And, Chairman, as long as it's understood, we're not mouthing, we're not using, just verbals. It's gonna be a full report as to why there is a delay. I wanna make sure that that is clear and no issues about that. That's the motion. If somebody has an issue with it, Mr. Chairman. So I've said all I want to say, so I withdraw my point of order after having heard that everybody seems to be in consensus generally on, you know, what we're doing.
Commissioner Malphurs, did Commissioner Thomas's statement just address?
Yeah, that was all I wanted to say, except to say that all those providers that are watching need to realize that our date is December 31st, and they need to make their financial houses in order accordingly. That's what I'm saying. And that's, because I realize this is public, and I realize other people hear it. And I want them to understand what the majority of the commission as of right now is saying. And that's it.
Any other? Okay. So, I do think we have something though from the committee, which is this I'm gonna call it the implementation date. This is to throw a third term to that. We originally talked about October being the implementation date. We're really not in a position to do that. Under the original motion that it passed, we've given ourselves to that January 1st date. I think as out of committee, at least, it came out that the proposal was to go ahead and change that implementation date target to what was given in the original motion as opposed to the earlier date in October.
Right.
Okay? So that was the motion. Coming out of committee, we'll treat it as having been seconded. So with regard to that change, or that proposal, that vote of confidence for getting it done by that date, any other discussion? All in favor of that, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, that motion out of committee passes. All right. Next item on the agenda is the at-home recruitment and settlement options, tab 5. And we continue to recognize Commissioner Blackwood.
So, we talked a lot about the day programs, the fact that many are still closed, some of them opening slowly. We kind of got an update on that situation based on the COVID issue that we're all dealing with. And we were presented during this committee meeting some options about how to deal with the situation with the day programs and what it's costing us every month and every I guess quarter to since COVID isn't going away anytime soon, it seems like. So and day programs are opening very slowly. So for this meeting, we didn't vote on anything regarding this because we wanted the 5 options to be presented to the full commission. And I can have Chris kind of discuss those options, and then we can, maybe vote on which way we want to go dealing with this situation.
I think Chris needs to say which one which of the 5 that the
Right.
agency is recommending. Pretty much, I think everybody's been able to read the 5, but which one is he recommending?
Yeah, so, yeah, at tab 5, you should have a document that should look fairly familiar.
Chris, hang on
Yes,
one
I'm
second.
sorry.
One second.
I'm sorry.
Is everybody good with what Commissioner Malphurs just requested in terms of sort of going directly to the staff recommendation amongst the 5 options? Does anybody need us to go over the 5 options anymore? Okay. Chris, did you hear me on that?
Yes, sir. And so having heard that, we have recommended item 3 on page 2 of the document. And it very much models what we've already done. The distinction here is that we want to incentivize at a higher level day programs that are opening so that those that are out there see a direct correlation to their budget with their efforts to reopen and be creative about how they can provide services to our consumers. And so that particular recommendation, we are proposing that we pull back an additional 10%, so it'd be a 60% recoupment of day program revenue loss. So this is not, just to be clear, we are not talking about pulling 60% of the band payments back or the day program component in the band payments. We are simply looking at what harm has been done to DDSN due to these closures and how do we rebalance due to that so that we can keep our budget in line. And so this is pulling back 60% of pre-COVID day program loss amounts by provider, but they will then turn around and get 100% of their funding for their actual units that they are generating at $27.50 for the half-day unit, and then for support employment, I think it's $15.93 or $16.93 for a 15-minute unit. And based on my running of numbers, this is a very favorable situation for providers. That even though we're proposing to recover 60%, this actually leaves a lot more money in the provider system, and that is due directly to them actually reopening and providing services. And that's why we landed on this one. The other 4 actually have different reasons that we don't feel that they're as strong as this third one.
Okay, so we're not recouping money like we did in May from anybody. We're not recouping any of the band payments, what you're saying. So
yes, we would. It'd be actually identical to May, except it'd be 60%. The flip side, the second piece to it, though, that we did not do in May is actually pay them fee for service back to July 1 as a secondary revenue back to them. So the recoupment would still be, it's virtually identical to last one y'all approved, except at 60 instead of 50, because in the other model, we didn't pay for day program. We just recovered the lost revenues. In this model, just to incentivize and recognize the providers that are making, effort to reopen, we felt like we needed to bring something to the table where they could see a direct benefit from those efforts.
Well, I don't hardly agree with that. We do need to pay fee for service. The question is, how much do we really need to how much does it really need to be 60 or 70% of the recruit, because they're getting a lot of money, but I'm not privy to each individual person's day program rates of what they're going to be receiving. So of each individual one, and I'm not sure I need to get that detailed, but I guess the real question is, are we actually recouping? So we're going to be recouping a lot less money from them in a way than we did in May. Is that correct? Because we're doing both, even though we're doing 60% instead of 50, which I think is great, because 60% is better than 50. But if you're adding, and I agree with adding, don't get me wrong, I agree with paying fee for service and adding money to it. Don't get me wrong. But the question is, should it be 70% that we recoup instead of 60, because we're already giving them part of that money? Because we need to remember that we don't need to be the providers' revenues. The collective revenues, as I understand it, have gone up. And if you want to give me a number, Chris, I know it was 64 million in May, and I believe it was another number. It's another number now because of PPP loans and other things. But isn't it higher than 64 million now collectively?
Yeah, you're talking about cash reserves. Yeah, they reported approximately $80 million on their June self-reported reports, but as you noted, there's some distorting figures in there related to PPP. Yeah, I don't really feel like they should have included that in the number since we asked for unrestricted reserves, but it's I think it is included by most providers in there, which is why it seems so high, which is probably $10-12 million of that increase.
Okay, but my point, and I agree with that wholeheartedly, but my point is that they are increasing in their revenues, and that we're losing $143,000 a day. Or more. I think it's more than that. I think we're actually being very conservative by saying $143,000 a day. But, you know, with the way this current model is going without being fee for service, which is what's so important about being fee for service, which we've discussed over and over. But the last point to make about that is, do we really need to go with, and I don't mind your program, I mean, your assessment of number 3, but do we really need to go with 60%, or could we, or is it, what is unrealistic about saying 70% we recoup plus giving them fee for service for the actual
Yeah.
days that people are there, because
Well,
the more you tell them we're gonna take, if you don't have people, you find a place, the more opportunity they have to get the places open, and the more opportunity they have to give these people services, which is what we're all about. The point is that what this agency should be all about is increasing services for less money, and that's exactly what fee for service does. It increases the number of people served because it gives incentive, which is what I love about what you did about paying them fee for service for the amounts of money for the people that are actually there. But what is the concrete reason for 60 instead of 70 or 80% to be taken?
it's not scientifically justifiable, but what logically where we are on that is we know that there are fixed costs that providers have related to their facilities and fleet. And we need to make sure that these day programs can reopen. And if we start cutting all these funds out from under them, you know, we have concerns that when a vaccine is available or there's the ability to reopen, you know, how ready are they going to be if we cut the funding so low that they have to turn in vehicles, sell vehicles, you know, do things that harm their ability to put the services back when we can restore them.
I agree, but and I'm not disagreeing with a percentage of the money. The question is, why couldn't it be 70 instead of 60? Because that would be a lot closer to what we did in May, and and it would give them increased incentive. As I say, the more we take, the more of that percentage we take, the more incentive they have to get moving and get started and get going. And I truly do believe there will be a vaccine very soon. And so all this stuff will hopefully and practically change. But still, fee for service would solve this whole problem, but since we cannot do that, I understand we have to give a percentage. But I mean, when you say that percentage, you're saying 60%, we'd have to be talking about each individual provider to know the numbers. But you're talking about millions of dollars you're leaving on the table for them to have in addition to fee for service payment. And by the way, that fee for service payment is the amount that if we went to fee for service tomorrow, that $100 and something a day is what we'd be paying. Is that correct? We're not going to fee for service tomorrow, but if we were, the 100, whatever the amount that you said you were going to pay them per day is 100 and, I mean, not
Well,
100.
it's $27.50 per half day unit.
$27.50 a day. That's the amount we would be paying if we were to fee for service?
If we were fee for service, we would probably be paying our full rate, which is $31.29. But currently we're not in that model. We don't have an administrative contract in hand. So the split rate has to stay in place until we've negotiated an admin contract with Health and Human Services, which is also part of the holdup on the Band BI flip project that we were just talking about.
Okay. All right. Well, that's what I'm saying. I would just love
I
to.
remember us talking about in our committee meeting that there needed to be a kind of a cushion for providers regarding replacement services. And that is what made me feel okay with the third option, because replacement services can be things like respite or PCA or other options for families. And, you know, I just didn't feel like we wanted to make that suffer, those options not be available or not be, the money not be there for them to choose those services. And so just wanted to throw that out there since we did spend some time talking about that.
I can add just a few more facts to that. I agree, 60/40, 70/30, 80/20 are all, should be on the table. And the rationale for us landing on 60/40 versus something less, when I look at it, is we did an analysis of one board in great detail about what the replacement services were. In my estimation, they were about 15 to 20%. So of that 50, they spent 15 to 20%. So there was cushion in there when we left them in May and June. Going forward, dropping, so I think dropping it from 50 to 40 is very reasonable. And the question is, why do you stop at 40, go to 30? And I looked at it from a perspective of, we are still a capitated model. You still have a contract with them that gives them a 20% vacancy rate. So when I take the replacement services and the 20% vacancy rate, I get to 40% pretty quickly. And so to me, you can justify 30 or 40. I think 40 is just marginally better because of those two factors. And plus, what we gotta remember is when providers are opening today at the rates we pay them, they're opening in a COVID-19 environment where they have higher ratios, they have higher costs, they have lower attendance, so their overhead is disproportionately high, and they have this crazy risk of shutting down tomorrow if they have an outbreak. So I think when we're talking about where do we find that cut line, I think trying to juice them to get going. I hear 40, I think 40 is better than 50. And I think if we go too much lower, all of a sudden, I think we might disincentivize them starting up the engine. So I think it's a legitimate question. And I think we came to 40 based on, I came to 40 based on those aggregate reasons that it was aired a little bit side of the providers, because I've heard from them firsthand that some of them were sitting on the sidelines because they fear they're going to do all this energy and have all these costs, hire all these people, and then you shut down in 2 weeks. So I think, and is clear as bell from the conversation today, on January 1st, we're going to be fee for service. So this is really only a 3-month solution.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
I just wanted to add to the record, this is Commissioner Miller, that I agree with what I heard, but I also heard that if things change, or Pat or Chris, they see something different, so we don't get locked into the 60. What I heard them say that if they see that that needs to be adjusted between now and then, they'll notify us. So that it's a floating vehicle right now. And I agree with that wholeheartedly.
And to give you more confidence on that is that in June, the providers' ratio of day program compared to pre-COVID levels was 15%. They were 20% in July, and they were 25% in August. So they're clicking up. And so under this model, we're going from 50 to 40 exposure, so we're saving money. They're going from 40, and across, on average, they'll be at 65% if they use August numbers. So they're getting closer to being more healthy. And what makes us all work is we got 25% of billing activity that we didn't have in May and June.
And we would expect them to keep us abreast on those numbers. If they change, we need to know.
If they go up 20 more %, we'll come back and we'll cut it because they're not going to do replacement services if they're back at work, back.
So we really don't have an accurate number as to before COVID, what their basic numbers were. We were paying at 80%, but they were probably not we were probably not close to 80% even before COVID, right?
I agree. Before COVID, we had a vacancy rate for at home. Yeah, at probably 30 or 32. So to me, I agree 100%. From a financial perspective, hey, we were already wasting money before COVID. And I think now, if we're going to, that's already baked into the cake. So I don't think we're adding any more liability than we've already had.
And we need to incentivize folks to bring people back. I mean, it's just beyond the pale. And because we do have people still sitting on the sideline.
And I do want to make one more comment if I can. Just just keep in mind that if we have more billable activity, it is generating revenue for us. So it's not like we're just paying them $27.50 a unit and we're generating no additional revenue to pay them that. So it takes a lot of the risk out of the system that, let's say it comes back really, really strong. That's good for us because we're getting our money back. That's the goal. Not only to give services to consumers, but, to get everything ramped back up and to help us get our budget back in order.
Okay, so to summarize, coming out of committee, not seeing any further discussion coming. The proposal is to approve option number 3 from page 2, in a nutshell.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Treat that as a motion and second.
Second.
Yeah,
no.
Yeah.
Well, motion's been seconded.
Motion, it's already second. Thank you, that's fine. Never heard some more. So any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of option 3, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
I'm not opposed.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. So let the record reflect that that particular motion to approve option number 3 passed unanimously. All right, I think that's the end of the Finance and Audit Committee. Thank you, Rob, for all the hard work that y'all did. Moving on, next time on the agenda would be the Policy Committee. We'll recognize Commissioner Malthus to give us a report. Going to tab 6 in our book on the governance policy, governance process.
Sorry. I wasn't ready, but I am now. This is Barry. The governor's policy, we look back at it, if everybody remembers from the last meeting. And the 2 things that we decided to add to the governance policy, or the 2 ways we decided to change the governance policy, was the following, which is basically, I'm not gonna read it verbatim, but basically it was to take a paragraph from our bylaws and add it to that, which is that, no commission policy is meant to in any way hinder a commissioner's authority given by the governor or the commission. And that's just reiterate what we already knew, but I love consistency and in cases, and I think that's a great statement to reiterate things in a lot of in as many policies as necessary. So, you'll see that we thought that was a necessary, policy, thing to add. And then the other thing, of course, the big thing is that there's a sentence, the first sentence of that policy is struck now, that it says commissioners will request information from the staff through the executive director. That's now null and void. And it says that the commissioners may seek information from any staff, but preclude them from giving any directive to the staff. And that's to prevent the problems we have apparently had in the past, not with the current commission, I don't think, but with ones in the past. So that's how we thought best to solve that problem. And so that's our motion coming out of committee.
Okay. Coming out of committee, we'll treat that as a motion and second. Any further discussion regarding the governance process policy? Seeing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, let the record reflect that that passed unanimously. Next item is the dual relationships policy.
The next item, yeah, it's correct, is the relationship policy, it's 10027DD. And it was simply to make the words more consistent with person and person served, and those sorts of, to safeguard the way that our policies are trying to be written nowadays, with the words persons instead of consumers or other things. It's primarily what we did there. We know from last month that we did make another change for, to make sure that people realize that if they needed, we wanted them to caution to make sure they felt comfortable with basically getting rid of somebody if they needed to, even if that person was somebody they knew and things of that nature, is basically the intent of the policy. I'm not reading it, but that's the intent of that paragraph, and that's also there, but that was there before. And so, well, that's been added, so, so that policy, as you've seen in your packet, is what we're asking to be approved.
Coming out of committee again, we'll treat that as a motion in a second. Any discussion regarding the dual relationships policy? Seeing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, let the record reflect that that motion was approved unanimously. Thank you, Barry, for the work on that with the committee and the committee. All right, next item would be tab 8.
One other thing about the policy committee.
Was there, sorry, go ahead, I apologize.
Sorry. I was just saying that we did refer several, policies to the staff. The latex protocol policy and the vaccine policy, and we had a discussion about vaccine policy and just saying that it would be a choice, of course, like all of the vaccines are, if we do have a COVID-19 vaccine. But anyway, that's technically been deferred to staff, and still has the like I say, the vaccination policy and the immunization procedures policy and the standard for first aid. And we're working to try to get some of these policies into other areas and not necessarily a policy, because some of these are not necessary, but that's for the staff to decide. And there's one other one, the emergency management system operations policy, we also defer to staff. So all those have been deferred to staff, and we'll get back to that another date.
Sorry, didn't mean to run over you there. Anything else? Anything else from the policy committee?
No, that's it.
Okay, all right. So now, moving on to tab 8 in your packet, Spinal Cord Awareness Month. We recognize Melissa Ritter to give us that update.
Hi, good morning. I'm Melissa Ritter. I have the pleasure of working in the Head and Spinal Cord Injury Division here at DDSN. I hope you can read this mask on. But we want to acknowledge that September is National Spinal Cord Injury Awareness Month. There are more than 17,000 new cases of spinal cord injury in the United States every year. The most recent data we have shows that there are approximately 302 instances of spinal cord injury, new spinal cord injury in the year 2018. During Spinal Cord Injury Awareness Month, we like to spotlight individuals with spinal cord injury. The last 2 years, we hosted art galleries and had artists who have spinal cord injury come and showcase their work and offer it for sale. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do that this year, but we did want you to hear from individuals with spinal cord injury. So in your packets is some information, facts and figures, and then some spinal cord injury survivor vignettes that we were able to work with the Spinal Cord Injury Association of South Carolina to obtain. And we just hope that you'll take time to read through those, and we appreciate your support of individuals with spinal cord injury. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Melissa this time?
I'd like to just say what you do. I have a daughter who has a spinal cord injury. She actually started walking this way.
Wow.
So we're very excited. But we do pay close attention to what you all do, and you all have been excellent and exceptional to work with.
Thank you.
Let me say that about spinal cord injuries, that give a shout out to my grandfather who's passed away, that he was instrumental in a lot of things in my life, and he died when I was 10. He had a spinal cord injury and had a lot of things to say to my parents about me and what I would end up doing and that sort of thing. And I just can't tell you enough about what he did as a person and what and how I think that those that can help people with spinal cord injuries are doing a remarkable work. And I am so sorry for those that have spinal cord injuries, as I do with any other disability, but for whatever reason God chose for that to happen. So anyway, I just wanted to say that. Sorry.
Anything else? Thank you, Melissa. Appreciate the presentation. All right, next item on the agenda is the internal audit update. Recognize Kevin Jacoby.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Just have to say thank you for the opportunity, and thank y'all for, I only had to drive a few miles in this mess. Some of y'all had to drive miles and miles and miles and have to go back home in it, so thank you for your efforts. I really was just going to talk about some of the projects that we're currently working on, and then I pass out a handout earlier today that everybody should have and touch on that, and then sort of make myself available for any questions. So current,
Chairman, if I could, one quick, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I apologize.
I was the one that requested Mr. Jacoby because I hadn't had an opportunity to meet him, and I consider him an internal auditor, being the internal auditor, it's a mighty big deal. And given COVID and all that stuff and how disjointed, things have been in a way, since we're back here, I wanted just to see you in person. I hadn't spoken to you except at the beginning of as we were starting about an hour and a half ago, 2 hours ago. So I appreciate so much him being here, and just, Mr. Chairman, I think it behooves us to know exactly what he's doing, and know that we can call on him to ask, real serious internal questions. If you notice on your agenda, there's just all kinds of audit stuff, and to have our own internal division that can provide information to staff as well as commission, I think is awfully important. So thank you for coming in. And all I was asking for, Mr. Chairman, was the opportunity to meet him, hear what he's doing, hear what's happening, and just basically get a briefing on the status of all that's going on. Thank you.
thanks, Commissioner Thomas. Kevin, you said you had a handout? I did not, I don't have that.
I laid one up there.
Right there.
I brought extras.
Color.
Yeah.
Oh, it's,
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it.
okay, sorry, it's colored, sorry.
Yep.
It would have bit me if it was the same. I apologize.
So
Go ahead,
again,
Tim.
good morning. So as has been discussed throughout this morning about issues with COVID, we are also dealing with that issue ourselves within internal audit in terms of accessibility to the provider network and to be able to do some audits. So we currently have been working mainly in-house on projects. What we're doing is wrapping up in the next couple of weeks. And as y'all all know, every time we issue an audit, y'all get a copy of our audit report. Every audit report we do comes to y'all. But we're wrapping up a audit of specialized family homes. This is a program that as children age out of DSS, therapeutic foster care homes, we try to transition those homes over to DDSN homes. So there's hopefully a seamless transition for the individual receiving services. So we are conducting an audit of that and wrapping that up. We're also looking at central office procurement and compliance with the procurement code. As a sub part of that, we are also looking at P-card or procurement card purchases. Again, agency-wide at all the centers. We're also looking at the client banking system. The client banking system is the banking system utilized for our regional centers and our community ICFs, as we are the representative payee for those individuals. And we receive their SSI, SSA payments into that system, and then payments are made out on their behalf. So we're conducting an audit of that. We have had one auditor who has been assigned on a special project for IDRD since early July, so we are sort of short one staff currently. Hopefully that's wrapping up soon. Administratively, we're working on updating our audit procedures manual. As I'm sure y'all are aware, because it was brought to the Finance Audit Committee last month. We're working on our internal audit committee charter as well as our internal audit charter, and also working on our audit plan. So that's how we're spending our time these days. With regard to the handout, it's really just sort of a brief synopsis of an effective internal audit committee. It's published by the Internal Audit Institute of Internal Auditors Association. It's a brief handout, but if you even have less time, I would say on page 3, there's a 10-point oversight checklist. Those top 10 issues, to look at those and make sure that we're complying in terms of that regard, because as you know, audit, I think was brought up last month in the policy, audit committee functionally reports to this commission and administratively to the state director. And then the other thing that I think over on page 6, maybe there was another, again, if you have mental time, important questions to ask, and this is in terms of internal audit. To make sure, and certainly I want to be held accountable, to make sure that we are complying in those areas. In terms of compliance with the IA's Code of Ethics, Quality Assurance Programs, etc. So that's pretty much what I had. I will be happy to answer any questions that anybody may have, and just know you can certainly reach out to us at any time.
And can you tell us about your staff and what kind of staff you have and who else in there?
I can.
What they do?
I can. So currently we have 5 auditors. They all sort of share the general responsibilities, which is auditing the provider network and DDSN operations, to include central office operations and the 5 regional centers that we have. They are, trying to think. So we have several professional certifications on staff. I think I have a summary that might help me with this. So we have several professional certifications on staff. In terms of certified internal auditors, which is sort of the premier designation if you're in internal audit, we have 3 of those 5, including myself, there's 6. So 3 of the 6 have the certified internal auditor. We also have certifications in risk and management assurance. We have 2 auditors that have that. There's also a certification for government. It's called a certified governmental auditing professional. 2 of our auditors have those credentials. I'm a certified fraud specialist. We have a couple of master's degrees, individuals, one in information technology, one has an MBA. Highest level experience would probably be about 20 plus years with DDSN in internal audit. And on the low end would be 2 years with DDSN. We typically don't have much turnover. Typically the auditors that we have that would be newer, we're replacing somebody who retired. So we do have consistency within the unit.
Are they paid competitively, would you say, based on the industry
No.
standard for those?
No.
Who hires for this space? And do you oversee that?
Yes, ma'am. So it is a process where we will do, typically I will do a first interview with another auditor. And then when we narrow down a short list, we bring back auditors, the applicants to interview with everybody. Everybody gets about 15 or 20 minutes with them in one of our conference rooms. Because, sometimes we do have to pair up on projects, and so they're traveling together, again, pre-COVID. And so, we want to make sure that there's good symmetry, that everybody's able to get along. And it really, as I tell the applicants, it gives them the opportunity to ask any questions of the auditor. What do y'all really do? Is this guy really a jerk? Do I really want to work here? It gives them the opportunity to, so I really do consider the interview process being a 2-way process.
Okay.
Because I will tell, and I tell applicants, this is, again, going back to the history that we have. Once you start here, you'll know within a year or 2 whether this is for you. And if it's not for you, that's not an issue. I understand it. But if you find that this is for you, you're probably going to end up retiring.
And so they're fully staffed, you're fully staffed.
Yeah, you have some open
We have
positions.
3 vacancies from where we had several years ago.
And who approves their pay increase? Who, if they were to get a raise, who?
Typically, that goes through, like I would bring it to the state, or the audit director would bring it to the state director for approval. That becomes the administrative end of the reporting.
And you're working with Mary right now on what your new directives are gonna be for next year, is that correct? So y'all gonna bring that back to the finance committee either
We'll
next
bring,
month or next, is that right?
we'll bring that back to the Finance Audit Committee next month.
So y'all met on that, y'all are working on that and all that?
We've had an initial meeting and we have a subsequent meeting planned for that as well. And I think it didn't come this month because it was an abbreviated Finance Audit Committee meeting to just address certain items that needed approval for this meeting.
So what was your hire date?
Well, I am one of those folks that left and came back, so I was here as a senior auditor for about 5 years. I left and I started the audit function at Department of Motor Vehicles. And after a couple of years, the director retired and they called and asked that I come back. So I've been back here since 2009 as the director.
2009?
Yes, sir.
Chairman, one quick question. I heard you say that you didn't have, or are you staffed up, or there were three auditors short?
With three positions, we had an administrative position that left that's not been filled. We had a part-time auditor who was dealing with, mainly his position was to review the external audit reports that we have that come in from the CPAs and the agreed upon procedures report. So we've had to restaff to handle that internally. Now, one of those, this year, there has been a change in that directive. So it has moved to DDS&N Finance, where it was housed with audit. And DDS&N Finance will be getting the financial reports, and we're just getting the agreed upon procedure reports from the provider network.
So you need more staff, or you got it kind of under control with the lack of staff?
You know, I mean, I think we have it under control with the lack of staff, but it's all about resources. If y'all want us to do more, then we can do more with more resources.
Do you interface with Legislative Audit Council and all these other, I mean, I'm looking on the agenda, all these other, so I'm presuming you're a voice for us with them?
Typically, when we have an external, like the LAC coming in, then they're gonna come down and talk to us. They wanna review our audit and see what we have done. Same thing, MMO has an audit certification team that comes in that looks at our procurements. They wanna come down, talk to us, see any work we've done. That's one reason I mentioned the P-card audits. Legislative Audit Council did an audit several years ago and said this is an area that all agencies ought to be auditing internally. To be quite honest, this is the first year, I think, I know the draft of the state auditor's office, and I don't know what was in that agreed upon procedures report, but typically when they are in to do their agreed upon procedures, they want to come talk to us. We did provide them, that's right, we did provide them with a copy of all of our audits, but we did not have a face-to-face with them.
Chairman, I mean, there's so much financial issues going on with the agency. It seems, I don't want to use the first line of defense, but the first line of are we doing it right? And to make sure, I mean, if you got called on, for instance, I'm chairman of the legislative, I forgot what the title of it is.
Right.
We have a meeting, the legislature has a meeting.
Right.
You know, so, but I could see the House Ways and Means Committee or the Finance Committee, if questions started arising, calling you and, wanting to know answers to various kinds of things that they might have an interest in. So for that reason, I'm wanting to make sure that our liaison that Mary is looking for right now, as well as what you are doing, have plenty of backup so that we don't find ourselves as a commission saying, well, we didn't know anything about that. So you're in a sense, well, Mary, obviously, but I mean, in terms of questions that would be audit kind of questions, that's why I think it's very important that you stay very integrated with us in what you're doing.
Yes, sir.
So thank you, Chairman. That's all I have
Okay. For my own information, 2009, what did the audit look like to you? So you said you were hired in 2009.
Yes, sir.
What did the audit look like to you at that time?
Production was extremely low. I think the year that I came here, they issued 5 audit reports. And I came here in June, the end of our fiscal year is July 1. I signed off on 3 of those reports got out during the month of June that I was here.
Okay, and what were your assessment?
I think we are we're nowhere close to where they were. I mean, our production for the staff size that we have, I would put up against any audit shop.
2012. What's your feeling on the audit at that time?
From our perspective, in terms of the numbers that we were
From 2009, 2012, what did you see?
growing, that our audit numbers were going up. We were getting staff trained and tooled up. At that point, we had probably hammered out our administrative issues and gotten a solid internal audit policy manual in place. And that we were working towards, we did at that time, we would have had a couple of senior staff folks. So looking at transitioning those folks once they retired, bringing in, and what we did when they retired, because as an agency, we do not have a career ladder, some agencies do. So my thought process, like when I came here, everybody was a senior auditor on staff. And there are a lot of agencies that do that now. To get to a compensation level, back to your question, they have to hire at that level. But in working with my audit manager, what we tried to do at that time was start our own level, career ladder, if you will, and bring people in as an auditor 3 and give them some mobility to move up.
Okay, so when did you discover that there was some issues going on? When you first arrived, or?
Well, in terms of issues, I mean,
Audit.
simply because because I worked here, I mean, I still had, conversations with staff, so I knew that the production was down, and I knew that was one of the things that we were gonna have to work on. There had been some past issues as well in terms of, audit, I think, was seen as a gotcha, had sort of a gotcha mentality, when I got here. We worked really hard on changing that to we're a resource. As they say, I'm an auditor and I'm here to help, but really trying to get providers to buy in to that and understand it. And I think, Gary, when we moved towards we had to implement, based on some legislative input, we had to implement some fines. And I said, at that point, I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm not really a fan of this because I've been working so hard for people to view us as a resource, and now I'm afraid they're gonna start viewing us as punitive.
So without naming names, you felt as though you found the problem and
Oh, absolutely. We are head and shoulders above where we were.
and moving towards a good resolution.
I think certainly I would say as y'all, and I would encourage you to go out and visit the providers in your area and to go to those regional meetings that they have and to ask them what their opinion of internal audit is. Do they view us as a team player? And I hope that you find out exactly what I think you're going to find out.
So how do you come to a balance between internal and external audit? How do you measure that?
Right. Well, we are a little bit, organizationally, we are a little bit of a odd entity, if you will, because we're called internal audit. And again, all DDSN operations are within our audit universe, but we also deal with the provider network. I mean, we do, of course, client funds and property, but all kind of administrative audits at the provider network level, or we have in the past. And technically those really are external parties. Now, years ago, this is before my time, so I just heard of it, it was set up so that they had an external audit. Within audit, you had an external audit unit that was looking at the provider network, and you had an internal unit that was looking at DDSN operations and regional centers and that kind of thing.
Okay, so
But
when
that was
you,
done
when
already.
you took, over, did you do an audit? When you first, was hired in your position?
Internal or external?
Yes, internal.
Yeah, internal.
Well, again, having been here and only been gone for a couple of years, I sort of knew the baseline. Believe it or not, auditors do have to be audited. So we're required to have a peer review every 5 years.
But my question is, when you came and took the position, did you do an internal audit?
Of the eight,
Yes.
with internally,
Internal.
I did, but again, I had a pretty good idea where the,
I would just like to see that.
in terms of issued an audit report,
Yes, sir.
no, it was an internal assessment of where we needed to go and to build the process. Now, what we have done
Was
is,
that written?
no, sir, just in like in our build, like their audit, our internal audit procedures manual, like that, building that, creating that document. Not a written report. Now, what we do have is, when I came here, again, we have to have a peer review. There's 3 citations on the peer review, in terms of you're not in compliance with the standards, you're partially in compliance with the standards, and you're generally compliance with the standards, which I say they need to work on their adverbs, because if you get the highest rating and it's generally, that just doesn't sound good, but, so prior to me coming here, it was partial. We've had 2 peer reviews since I have been here. Both of them have been generally compliance. So we have had the highest rating that you can get.
So looking back, would you have done an internal audit? If you, just taking a look back, would you have done an internal audit before accepting the job?
Again, I sort of knew I knew what I was walking into because I had a history. I'd been here for 5 years.
Well, the only reason I ask that is because, you know, you always at the back of your mind, you're thinking of forensic.
Right.
Would it have been in your mind that maybe I need to do an internal? Just a question.
Oh, I think maybe in my mind, I knew we had a lot of relationship building to do, and I knew we had some administrative issues that we needed to correct.
The real question is, have we done an internal audit since then?
Now, our division.
Since you started?
Yeah, our division has to be, again, has to have a peer review, which is an audit every 5 years.
You don't necessarily do internal audits on a regular, consistent basis, or maybe you do 1 or 2, but not for the full 8. I mean, like I know there's,
Right.
most of your time is spent outside of the agency auditing, not inside the agency auditing, correct?
Right, so what we have done in the past is we would develop our audit plan in conjunction with our funding, with our revenue. So 80% of our revenue went to the provider network. 80% of our audit resources would go into the provider network. 17% went to running regional centers. 17% of our audit resources would go to auditing regional centers. 3% administrative. We have very low administrative.
So based on that formula, would you modify that now?
I think that that's what we're having discussions with in terms of our audit committee, our audit charter right now. So I do think that we need to look more at DDSN operations. I think maybe one of the fundamental differences right now is I don't think we need to look solely at DDSN operations. I think if we walk away from the provider network, we're going to see instances start creeping up where there are issues with consumer funds and lack of compliance with directives that we have established. So I don't think we need to walk away completely from the provider network.
I have a question.
We can talk about it through the finance committee, but the question is the question that I think you need to get generally is what percentages you would like to see changed, and Mary would like to see changed. You looked at percentages, you had 3% before had been going to internal audit. Well, the question is what percentage should that be? Should that go from 3 to 50, 60, or 70, or should it go to, I mean, I'm not asking you to say now, I'm just saying, for
Right.
the next finance committee, we need to get some percentages in mind as to what percentages of your resources, because everybody in the nation everybody in this agency, everybody in every agency wants more money. So the question is, how can we allocate the money that you have more effectively? And so percentage-wise, that would be helpful, I think, to the committee.
Right, and
I have a question. You know, it was brought to our attention last meeting that we were missing some cost reports, that cost reports had not been filed. Who should have been letting this board know that that had not been done? I mean, a lot of us weren't here, I mean, I don't think any of us were here when it all started. Who would be responsible for telling this board that that was missing? And would that have come through internal audit? Would that have come through where?
Right, and I think that question was asked last month, and I think at that point, my response was that I sort of felt like, when it was mentioned, I mean, during executive staff, when this was discussed, there doesn't seem to be any rapid rush for those reports. It was almost presented as if HHS really wasn't that interested. Now, I will say, that being said, they are the funding entity there. To my knowledge, nobody ever, I can tell you, HHS never called internal audit and said, hey, what's the issue? We're not getting cost reports. And when it was discussed in executive staff, it was like they're not in a real hurry to get done.
So you do then feel as though we need to kind of look at, and so that the commission will have a full understanding and not get caught up in a mousetrap that we shouldn't, we don't need to go backwards to 2009 is basically where I'm going to.
We definitely don't need to go back to 2009.
So, Mr. Chairman, and maybe what we probably need is just to get a better kind of grip on where we are.
Well, the cost reports were not done for years, since 2012, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, that is a travesty, and it's gonna cost us millions. But how that happened, I don't know, but how it happened, we'll never get a full picture of, I don't think. But the point is, moving forward, we need to make sure that obviously that never happens again. But in the interest of time, y'all, we're gonna have to move forward, but.
Yeah, and I do think that that's something that's definitely falls under the Finance and Audit Committee's responsibility to establish the audit plan, the resource distribution, all that sort of stuff.
Right.
That's really the ultimate agency. And Kevin, I appreciate you printing this out. I honestly think that this should be something that should be included in training for all new. This is the best summary of what an ideal internal audit program should be that I've seen. I've not seen, and this was not presented. I think this should be really a separate training session going forward.
Well, I do hate to hear that, because
I do
I agree, Mr. Chairman.
I hate to hear that, because I haven't always included it when they ask for orientation information. That document always went down the hall.
Yes. Is it, well, it needs to be highlighted, because did anybody else remember seeing it?
I don't remember seeing it in my training, but I got it.
I don't remember seeing it. Again, I went through that a long time ago, so maybe that's something.
I do think it's a great synopsis.
I do, and I think it should be maybe, again.
Chairman, if I could please, there are no questions, and I had one or two others, but it might take them down a rabbit trail. I mean, the outliers thing has mystified me for some time. I would like to have him, please put on the agenda and allocate him 20 minutes or so next time to answer questions of those that are not on committee that might be handling more specified stuff. But they're big ticket items, and to answer some of the questions that some of the folks have about this cost issue, that has mystified us all. How could we have missed this? Well, maybe the previous commissions, no, I'm not casting stones. If you don't bring your auditor in, it could very well be you don't get answers when you're not asking at least questions sufficient to let the auditor say, we got a problem. And that never apparently happened. And I don't think we should, here's the resource, we cannot be laissez-faire about this whole thing. It's got to be, okay, we got staff, we got internal auditor, you got external folks that are all over, but you might not get information from them, like you just said. And this is a catastrophe. And a lot of this comes down to how aggressive does every commission want to be over a period of time. So let's not let us be, you know, in the category of those that failed to ask the right questions of the right people. So I'm asking now, please, to put him back on the agenda again for next month.
Yes, I'd like to see that as well. I think we need to talk with him. We need to hear from him on a regular basis about what's being audited,
Yeah.
where we are, if there's anything, any other reports that we don't know about that aren't being.
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. You have to tell
Don't be
us.
shy.
And
We won't know those
I do think that the primary mechanism in the past has been more towards the committee as opposed to everybody at large. I'll just say that, I think that's, and you correct me.
I would agree.
Back when I was on that. So there has been that, but yeah, I mean, and I tell you, for me, it was coming in a couple years after it stopped happening. At that point in time, it had already been going, and nobody told me that it was an issue. And it was one of those strange things of, I didn't know enough to ask the question.
Right.
And that's always the issue, is who's the person who knows enough to ask the question and then report it to us. But yeah, no, I think that's fine. And again, in the interest of time, since we're going.
You know how the Declaration of Independence actually took place? Do you know the history of this? It was not by committee. It was the committee of the whole. The entire, all the states that had sent representatives, they formed what is now called, and the Senate still has this, you can form a motion to form a committee of the whole. Well, essentially, he's so important, we'll share him with the chairman of, but I want him to. This is a committee of the whole wants to ask him questions, and so that's why we need him back, to make sure there's no slip between the cup and the lip. And it can be big and it can be gruesome. So all the stuff that we're going over is great and wonderful and awfully important, but we can't leave this element out. So that's all I got. Thank you, Chairman.
Anything else? Yeah, it looks like you're on the fire line. I'm sorry.
I'll second that.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, it looks like you're on the fire line again next meeting.
Sorry about that.
Hey, safe travels, everybody. Be careful.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for coming in. All right. Next item on the agenda is the Office of the Inspector General Audit Update. Ella Schultz, who is making her debut here with us.
Another.
And that is tab 9. Tab 9 in your packet.
Good
Kyla,
morning.
thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
You care to introduce yourself as part of this process this
I
morning?
could. What would you like to know? No, we're not doing it. Good morning. I'm Kyla Schultz. I'm the risk manager here at DDSN, and I've been here since May 1st. I came from Pennsylvania, and we can someday talk about my whole history, but I have been working in the field of developmental disabilities since 1996, which I hate to admit, but yes, it's been that long. So, and I'm here now, very, very happy to be part of this team here at DDSN. So thank you. Mary wanted to put me on the agenda just to sort of go over where we're at with our Office of Inspector General Audit. So, and I believe this has been brought up prior to me being here on other agendas, just to make people aware that we're currently being audited. And so I thought I would just go through some basic info, give an update on our status, and feel free to ask questions at any time. I feel like you guys already know that, but just in case, feel free to interrupt me, or if I'm talking too fast or you can't hear me, let me know. So if you're not super familiar with the Office of Inspector General, they're actually exist for the Federal Department of Health and Human Services. So they're sort of the arm of that entity that really looks into the integrity of programs that are funded through HHS, and they do audits, investigations, inspections, and they're really there for beneficiaries served by programs. So we get federal funding for our waivers, so we're subject to those rules, and we have to follow some guidelines, and we submit our waivers every so often. It gets approved, and we really are beholden to what we say we're going to do. The reason these audits are being done, so it's not as if someone said, go to South Carolina because we have concerns. I believe every state will eventually be going through this process, so we're not alone. It was a congressional request due to media coverage of deaths and abuse with people with disabilities living in group homes. However, I will say that the audits include waiver beneficiaries that are not living in group homes. So if you're a waiver beneficiary and you get services linked to that waiver, you can come up in this audit. So it's not just folks living in group homes, but that was the original intent of the audits. But as they went out, I think they realized pretty quickly, being in a waiver does not mean you automatically live in a group home. And so you still need to be afforded those protections that everyone else is. So I'm pretty sure they changed their audit methodology if you just sort of look at where they started, where they are now, just a little bit to encompass some of those things. So what they're charged with is determining if each state that they go to follows the federal waiver requirements and state requirements related to incidents. So if we said we were going to do something in the waiver and we told that to the federal government, they're going to make sure that we did that. They also will look at our policies and procedures and to make sure that we did what we were going to do, said we were going to do on our own policies and procedures. So it's a twofold kind of audit. They spend an awful lot of time learning state-specific rules so that they can use that as they're going through the methodology of the audit. So we started, and again, I wasn't here. These are very long audits, very long processes, but we were notified on 4/10 of 2018 by HHS that we were going to begin this process. So HHS is a liaison at times, and we're working with them since we hold the data and do most of the work related to incident management. We work with them to sort of answer all these questions that come up with the audit as this process has been going along. The audit period, I know that we're in 2020, right? It's terrible, I don't know the year sometimes, but we're in 2020. The audit period that they're looking at is actually January 1st, 2015 through January 30th of 2017. So about what, 30 months-ish, something like that. So they are looking at past data. Now it wasn't, in 2018, it wasn't as old as it is now. So it is quite old now that we're, getting through this process, but they started, like I said, in April of 2018. And the audit methodology that they used is not something that anyone is really doing at this point in human services. So if you talk across the state and human services, we all sort of know each other somehow magically, and we all talk and, and we share information, and you can look at people's materials online. No one's really doing an audit methodology like this. So what they're starting the audit with, or they started the audit with, is they took Medicaid claims for every beneficiary for this time period. So that's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of lines of data. So they took that, and then what they did was they compared it, and I'm paring this down. There was 500 million steps in between, but I'm making it a little more simple. But they pared it down and compared it to incident reports that we have in our reporting system. So if there was a claim for someone that had a diagnosis code on it, and there can be tons of diagnosis codes on any one claim in the system, but if it had a code on there that would seem like, and they have a list of predetermined codes and things like that, that would seem like it would rise to the level per our policy and what we told folks in the waiver, they would say there should be an incident report for that. So if someone set foot in the emergency room and had, a fractured femur, if that met our policy and what we said in the waiver, they would say, where's the incident report? So they did some matching with that. And then they further match that even to the next level, which is codes that they predetermined that are indicative of abuse or neglect. Doesn't mean abuse or neglect happened. It just means the nature of the diagnosis could be associated with something that would be abuse or neglect. So they sort of start with a big, giant, high-level sample, and they start paring it down. And there's many conversations that go back and forth. Clearly, we've been doing this since 2018. So, they're paring things down. They're asking questions, going back and forth. But in general, they eventually will land with a couple kind of different things with the data. But at the end of the day, what they did was, in addition to looking at the claims and flagging things that they think should have been reported per our policy, but we didn't have a report, we will be required to respond to every single one of those. So they will give us and have given us a list of those. However, we're still doing our analysis because it takes human beings like ours to like research, contact people, look for records, see what really happened. And so that we're in the process of finalizing that right now. So I don't really have data for anyone that I can share. In the public report, they haven't even shared the draft with us. So I'm just sort of giving you a methodology. So when you see the numbers, and again, we can go over it again because I've been doing this for a while. This exact thing happened in Pennsylvania before I left, and I thought, I'm finally done with the audit. And then I came here, so I'm quite familiar with the audit methodology and sort of how it works. So in addition to those kind of basic math kind of one-to-one ratios that they're looking for with claims to incidents, they also, the auditors went out to hospitals and got records directly from hospitals. They visited providers, got records from providers. So they did. Now, I think it became problematic with COVID was they were trying to do this on-site kind of things as things were sort of finishing up, but they did get their hands on records, talked to people, did some more investigation, and they will flag some things and they sent us some hospitalization records and just said, could you dig into these a little deeper? So we're working through all that right now. And just in case folks, I think in your packet you probably have like some kind of paper that gives you some resources so you can look and see how other states have done. They've done Alaska, Massachusetts, Maine, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania. The title of every single report pretty much reads the same. The contents are very similar, and I feel pretty confident, when you read the contents of our report, the audit methodology will be very similar. The findings might be different. I can't speak to that yet. But we are in the company with all of our, all of those states, and they're out at a couple other states right now. I'm not sure which ones, but everyone eventually, in theory, should be going through this audit. Every state will get the same kind of feedback. So, and what they found, and after they did the first couple, the OIG was alarmed, according to their documents and sort of their presentations, about the findings of some of these audits. So they didn't want to wait to finish the audits. I think initially they thought, we'll do all these audits and then we'll have some kind of recommendation report for the whole country to use. But I think that they saw pretty quickly some patterns and they wanted to get information out to the field. So they did work with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the Office of Inspector General, the Administration for Community Living, and the Office of Civil Rights. They issued a joint report with recommendations for all levels of the system. So it starts at sort of the provider local level and goes the whole way up to CMS. So they recommend some things for the feds as well. And there is a link in your packet if you'd like to look at some of those, but it just gives you some model practices in regards to reporting, incidents, investigation of incidents, audits of incidents in your systems, and mortality reviews. So there is already some guidance to help folks going through these audits to think about how remediation could look when you get issued your final report. So that is already out there. So our current status, I did mention we're nearing the end of what I like to call the discovery phase, which is they're still looking through our data, going back and forth a little bit with responses. And then probably what they will do is have an exit meeting with us. They will issue a draft report. We will be given a chance to respond to the draft report, and then that kind of ends it, and it will get published. So that could take, when I say we're nearing the end of a process and it involves federal auditors, that could mean we're nearing the end of the process now, or in 4 months we're nearing the end of the process. How long it takes them to issue reports, I can't speak to, and they haven't really, revealed that to us. But we are, since I've been here, and I knew the audit was going on, and that is helpful to know that we'll be getting those results. But we're already working towards, really getting quality management and incident management aligned with a lot of those recommendations in the joint report. We want to involve, and we're in the early stages. Like I said, I haven't been here that long, so early stages definitely, but as we move along, we definitely want to make sure that we have input from stakeholders in some of the things that will probably need to change based on just the fact that, policies and procedures that were written a long time ago really need to be updated. We know a lot more than we used to. We have, more technology we can leverage. There's a lot of moving parts when you're doing this kind of work. So we want to make sure that we're not, as a state agency, overcorrecting based on an audit, going to something that's not reasonable for the stakeholders to implement. We want to be very, very measured with our response to this audit and make sure that we're not, going, like I said, the overcorrecting part. I really want to make sure that we're mindful of everybody's involvement in the process. So just a couple of things that we're already sort of in the process, and so we're working on, and this really aligns with, we were already working on this anyway, but CMS does a series of presentations about sort of incident management, quality management, and how you should be aligning your programs. And we magically were already sort of aligned with those recommendations, which is nice, but it's good to have some of that validation. So their recommendations really are having a very strong incident management policy that has very clear definitions so that people know what to report. They need to be able to recognize, because as a state agency, we only know what other people tell us. So they have to know what we want to know, and it has to be communicated very clearly. So we're in the process of looking at our current policies, seeing what we can do to strengthen that, and then of course we'll eventually be seeking assistance from stakeholders in commenting on those policies and really developing something that everyone feels that will protect health, safety, and welfare of our participants. And it's also something that's realistic to implement. So we have to be mindful of those kind of things at the same time. We are currently exploring an ability for our office to do an audit in a similar fashion to this audit. So we're looking for a way, and there really is only one solution, out there right now, but that doesn't mean that's what we're going to do, but to take the claims data ourselves and replicate, run that against our incident reports and see if there's gaps, things we're missing. Every single audit, I believe, that every state has been through, a recommendation has been, you must figure out a way to do this, and we're in the process of exploring that. That is a very, very labor-intensive process. Because claims data has hundreds of thousands of lines, and you can get it in Excel, but doing that kind of work in Excel is not necessarily an easy thing. So we're looking at some ways that maybe we could get some technology to support us with that. And again, also thinking about, we're in a really good position right now, as our current technology related to incident management is aging and reaching that decade-year-old plus mark, it's probably time for us to be looking at some upgrades of technology in our systems. So we want to make sure we're just exploring what's out there, that we can get data efficiently and effectively and decrease people's time doing manual processes to identify individuals that are at risk, providers that are at risk, and things like that. So we really want to make sure that we're leveraging technology that supports our policy. And then we are looking at our overall quality improvement strategy. So, and that, expands right outside of, I'm sorry, that expands outside of incident management. We're looking at case management and what case management can offer for us towards risk mitigation. We're going to be working on training materials that align with all of these kind of initiatives that we're working. And looking at our licensing and contract compliance processes to make sure that they line up with the CMS and the OIG recommendations. And we just want to make sure that we have everything sort of lined up and going along with the recommendations, and so we can make sure that we're protecting the health, safety, and rights of the participants. Okay, yep.
Any questions?
I noticed one sheet that we had in our packet, you had a lot of sites that you could go to. I mean, that would help us understand Because it sounds awfully complex.
It is awfully complex. So I sort of divided it. If you have little time to review and you wanted to just have a quick, synopsis, there's a video you can watch from the OIG. And then there's a two-page little fact sheet that explains sort of recommendations. And then, and then if you really want to do that deep dive, all of the documents on the right or the final reports for every state that has already been through this, plus that joint report with recommendations that I mentioned.
Chairman, could I ask of the director, can we get this one sheet for the public's sake, put it online
Sure.
also?
That's fine.
That's public, so I think that would be helpful if any technicians are out there that want to do the deep dive.
Yep.
As you say, I don't know.
It's hundreds of pages of
And that
reading.
stuff's been out for a very long time, and every time a new report comes out, we've been sending it out to them. So, but you have links to make it easier for you. We sent this electronically, so all you have to do is click on the link. So if you do want to read any of these reports, you want to look at that video, just click on that link in your email.
And if we don't want to, we don't click on it.
Correct. You may avoid at all costs if you don't
I'm
want
asking
to.
the question for technicians that are listening, that want to, that say, I want to get into this.
Right, and this will be part of the materials that will be posted up on the website, so anybody following will have that same opportunity.
I want to make sure this is
It will
right
be.
for people to be able to get to.
Yeah, it should be part of the material.
In that binder, it's going.
Okay.
Are you part of Kevin's team?
No,
No.
I'm not.
Okay.
She's
I do.
quality management.
I do talk to Kevin,
Yeah.
and
Okay, I
we
just-
and we do talk about sort of partnering on some things, but again, there's so many layers to get through. I'm trying to set, again, reasonable policies and reasonable things that people can keep up with. So Kevin and I have talked about, what are the financial audit components of the things that he does that might be valuable for my team, but we're in the infancy of that. We are not to the next level yet.
Thank you, that was the question, I meant to ask it, what kind of interface is there with, the internal auditor and what you do? Is there any help that he gives or is it just completely outside the domain of what he does and what this is all about?
No, we meet on all of us executives sort of meet on a regular basis, and if he mentions something I might think is valuable, I might say, hey, can I have some info on that? And he's brought some things to my attention about, oh, I did this kind of audit, and these providers you might want to check when you're doing your work. So we're trying to figure out a way to make this all fit together so it's efficient and people are not duplicating effort. Because again, if Kevin is reviewing something, why would I go review it too? That doesn't make any sense. So we really want to be as efficient as possible. And for providers, I don't want providers, I've worked at a provider for many years, going through the same audits over and over again is not a good use of your time. So we really need to all be communicating. And like I said, we're in the infancy of trying to coordinate and figure out what we're doing, so.
Tell us about your staff and what kind of staff do you have and how many people you have working with you on projects and that kind of thing.
So I currently have, two direct reports to me. Now, they also have staff under them, but I have two direct reports to me. So I sort of have things divided in two houses. So I have the house of the quality management, which is really following up to those on-site licensing visits, those on-site contract compliance reviews, things like that, managing some mortality reviews and deaths and incident reports. That's kind of that side of the house. The other side does some of those kind of things too, but mostly is focused on training technical assistants. And then when I need folks to do like a very deep dive on site, because we had some questions and things like that, those folks do some of that work for me. And so I sort of have it split right now into two arms, if that makes any sense, because we want to support providers. So it's not just like, oh, I gotcha, haha, I found something wrong. It's really great to have that expertise in-house to help them become compliant if there's a problem.
So you have an audit division basically and a training division.
That sounds perfect.
How many are in each division?
Yes, so I have in the training, I have a total of 3.
Okay.
Well, 3.5. I have a part-time person. And I believe we're going to be adding a nurse to do some more medical kind of things in the future. And so we have a healthcare coordinator kind of position. And then in the The audit side, I have to count on my hands because I'm a old lady.
There's quite a few on that.
Five, and they do a variety of things with licensing, and I said contract compliance and mortality reviews, and there's a lot of things that they're up to.
Is the experience on the team good, or is it young, are they all young, or is it, what's the turnover like?
So most folks have been here for quite some time, but in the training division, they, other than my direct report, the lead for that division, they are brand new, like within the last month or two. We
But
have
their experience runs deep.
Yeah,
The five that are on the other side, they have been here all the time.
they've been here multiple years. I don't think there's anybody that's less than 2 or 3 years.
So Mary, would Alliant would.
Well, right now, Alliance is just a contract, and the people on the other side of the house, this was gonna be part of my report, but she's taken my entire report pretty much and threw it in the garbage. I'm glad I worked on it so hard last night.
I'm a talker.
But basically, what we have here is quality assurance in this agency has always been one side of the coin. In other words, we measure. We had a very large department that basically monitored that entire Alliant contract. We're trying to redefine their jobs so that they are more in the fight of not only just measuring, but we need to help repair and train and then go back and measure to see if our efforts have made a difference on the other side. So at this point, we're in the infancy of this.
Yeah, I want to say, Mary, that was one of the last, before we had our interruption of mission, that was one of the last things that we sort of put in place.
Right.
That was sort of one of the first initiatives was to approve the creation of, I think her even position is
That
QA,
position.
and to create that second side of the house. I mean, that was, I want to say that was like almost one of the last things that we got done.
It was,
before we
and I went
lost
back and looked at the minutes, it
forum.
sure was.
So that's sort of where that came from, and then of course everything stopped because we couldn't.
And because honestly, and working with Kevin, it's also looking at what he's been doing in the provider network, and some of the stuff he's been doing, we can go ahead and do in licensing. So it gets looked at even more often versus whenever his team can get around to it. So we are looking at everybody's duties. And we have invited internal audit to look at us. That was Pat and I, we think that they should be looking more inwardly. And we can probably divide some of this stuff out to go into licensing, but again, we're looking at down the road. And maybe some of his team would be redeployed. Some of the team on the house that's looking at that Alliant contract might be redeployed in the other side of the house.
Yeah,
I'm trying to work with what we
me.
have and who we
It
have.
makes more sense to me for them to be looking at the providers and the internal auditor be looking more internally at what's going on in our organization.
Makes sense to me too.
Because we really, I mean, like, you them fix the problems that are out there, and then internally, we find the issues internally.
And as we move to new processes, going through this fee-for-service, we need somebody looking through and pressure testing things to make sure that we've done it correctly. Because I'm not saying that we know everything, but as we move down that road, we do need someone looking behind us to make sure that we're doing things properly. And what Kyla's team is doing also is going through all those directives we have to see, we have a directive on staff training. Well, that's also part of the requirement you have for your standard, that you have staff that have these so why would we have a directive on it if we can put it in our standard? So we're looking at seeing if we can get rid of some of those directives and put them where they belong. So there's not so much duplication, because eventually, when you have all this duplication, you're also going to have a conflict somewhere. Something's not going to be written the same. And it leaves you a big loophole for people to walk on through. And that's what we want to try to close.
And isn't it true she could handle, like if a client, if one of our customers had a problem with $2.32 that we owed them, couldn't she handle that part of things instead of Kevin handling that to audit there? Because I mean, literally, I've seen reports from him that say that we owe $2.32.
Yeah.
And you know how much money we paid to have him say that we owe $2.32?
Those are the things, what we need to do is try to major on some of the major things, because we do have so many major things. But not let go of the oversight that we're supposed to have for our consumers out there in the community.
But couldn't she, but she can handle that oversight.
We can. Then the other thing is the silos here. and again, this was in my report. The breaking down of the silos allows that collaboration and communication. Not just, this is in Kevin's area, and this is just in, but coming together as a team, and that's why this position is so important.
I think legacy, that's one of the biggest problems we had, was that everybody built their empire. And there was a lot of, this is mine, hands off.
Yeah.
And that's one of the ongoing things that we're trying to structurally break down to make things flow a little bit better.
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry, didn't mean to talk over.
And that is something that I bring from the community, because we just don't have the luxury of having that many, you kind of all have, when there's our issues, it's all hands on deck. Like we did with COVID, everybody kind of got in the game.
I guess we're getting, try to bring us back on and we're gonna, anybody have any other questions? Specifically with regard to the Inspector General audit that's ongoing.
Yes, and it's starting to get towards the end, that's why we wanted to bring this back up. Okay?
Kyle, it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a great day, everybody.
Okay, moving on, next item on the agenda, the financial update. Chris, are you still there?
I am.
All right, Chris, I recognize you. That is tab 10.
It is, and I'm going to try and go fast through these next three topics because I don't think they require too much in depth. But certainly, if I go too fast, let me know. We'll double back and go in more detail. So,
yeah, just let us get the motions in on each one, Chris, and then you're good to go. Just go one from the one right after the other as soon as we get the motions done.
Great. Just to remind you, we are still working on our continuing resolution. Have not brought an operating budget before you all yet related to the spending plan is what we call it. My budget director, Nancy Rumbaugh, and I and a team of others are working to develop that at this time, and hopefully we'll have that for you here soon, possibly at the next meeting. So when we're doing these comparisons, keep in mind that we haven't had a budget of $804 million. That's our appropriation, including federal match authorization is the term I should be using. So we're looking at our comparison. It shows that we're about 1% below the 2-month authorized budget, if you will. In fact, we are about $16.5 million of that $120 million. Again, just for you all to keep in front of you that we pay providers in advance. So there's a $16.5 million expense in there, expenditure that doesn't actually relate to July or August. After that adjustment, we're at 12.93% instead of 15.64. But that can be, again, a little misleading because we're comparing to a number of $804 million, which is not, it's, $20-30 million higher than the spending plan will bring you. But we're on track. Everything looks good. And of course, beginning of the year, cash is always strong because we receive our state appropriation in July. And so that would be my report, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions with regard to finance update? Any motion to approve said update?
Ed Miller, so moved.
We have a second.
Debbie Robinson, says second.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So let the record reflect on that one that it was approved, but that Commissioner Thomas has stepped out of the room and did not vote on that. All right, next up, agenda, provider contract increases.
All right, this is under tab 11. This comes to you basically in an odd format. It's a contract that we're recommending approving in excess of $200,000, but coupled with it is the actual process that resulted in this contract over $200,000. We are trying to get our outlier process back up and running properly. First step was to look at fiscal year 2020 that we just ended. Ideally, we get this stuff done during the year, close to year end, but due to COVID and the disruption of services, we weren't able to get a full analysis done prior to June 30. So what we're proposing to do is true up our Band B at-home outliers that are currently funded, which is a $601,000 take back from boards, but then turn around, and to the extent those providers had unfunded Band B outliers, that we would give them funds towards that. Those, not all of them, because we don't have enough money to fully fund every single consumer that exceeds the outlier threshold, and we can do a whole separate work session on that if you want, because that's a pretty deep dive. And then we analyzed the last 5 years of our outliers, and fiscal year 18 was the high point. And since comparing to fiscal 18, we're down almost $1 million of outliers through attrition, folks leaving the system for one reason or another. We wanted to grab approximately $500,000 of that and put it back on the street. So we then went through, and any provider that was upside down on their Band Bs, after all those other adjustments I just spoke to, would then allocate $400,000 to those providers. And so we have one provider, after doing all that, Florence Disabilities Board, which will be the preliminary numbers we have, which I don't anticipate them changing, would be a $259,610 increase for fiscal 2020. And so really, that's all we're asking for approval, but we can certainly delve down into the details as to how we got there if you have further questions.
And as far as outliers, you're planning on having a new criteria for outliers as of June 30th, correct? For us to be able to. That is correct.
That is correct. That's correct. We have a draft. I can send it to the commission if they'd like to see it. It's being reviewed by staff internally to pick it apart and make sure we've thought of everything, and then we will roll it out to the providers and commission once that is ready to go.
Approximately how many outliers would we allocate in 1 year? And approximately how much money is that? I have it in my notes.
You talking about dollar amount or number of consumers?
Dollar amounts. How much we would have and how much dollar amount it would be both?
About $7.5 million. I can look at my computer here and see if I can find the actual number, but.
And about how many outliers would that be?
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. I'm looking for it, Barry. I don't have it. My computer is giving me some fits.
Well, you can send it to us.
All right. Yeah, I'll send that to you.
You just send that to me with the report whenever it gets closer.
And so, Chris, it looks like obviously Florence is, I'm going to say the big winner, for lack of a better word. But that Lawrence is the one that's most negatively affected in terms of the impact of this amendment. Have we discussed this with them? Are they prepared? Could they weather that reduction?
No, none of this has really been rolled out to anybody at this point because we wanted to bring it through you first. But what we did is we fairly applied the rules, and we followed virtually the same process we followed last fiscal year. So if a board was monitoring their operations appropriately, which I know I used to do when I was in the provider world, I can anticipate this is coming. The rules are out there, they're known, they're not a secret. The issue is the timing of it is the problem. And Barry, there are 89 residential outliers in the current fiscal year and 97 at home at this time for a total of 6.9 million.
Repeat that, please.
All right, hold on, let me pull it back up. There are 89 residential outliers for $4.1 million, and then we have 97 at-home outliers for $2.8 million. So that's a total of $6.9 million for and 86 consumers. But back to Lauren's question, I mean, as we look at provider reserves and provider operations, that would be my secondary point to that, Mr. Lamel. So, I mean, I don't feel that it should be a problem, but I'm sure they would disagree with that statement.
Sure, and from a, I'm sure, and from a timing standpoint, this is going to be applied over a period of time, right? It's not suddenly Florence gets an additional 259 and suddenly Lawrence just doesn't get 138. What's the time frame that these sort of applies?
No, we would do an amendment, and it would be immediately funded, or recouped.
Okay. Okay.
You know, let me just verify something with you. These outliers, are they, this is the question, are they at the highest level they can get and they're just not getting enough at that band? Is that what this is, Mary? Like, for example, let's say they're a $100,000 outlier, or they're getting 100,000 in their band, okay? But it's actually costing 200,000 to take care of them. So the outlier.
Yeah, that's for residential, that's for those other bands of the Gs and the Hs, right? I mean, the H band, because you have to be at the highest band. But when you're talking about the band Bs and Is, we fund a band B. Chris, what's the band B funding? 15 something or?
13,994.
Okay. And so they might have budgets where they have lots of PCA and lots of respite and their budget might be very, very high. That puts them in that outlier category. Now, to your point, once we go fee for service, that is not, that outlier is not going to be needed anymore. Am I correct, Chris?
That is right, because we'll be paying all the bills direct.
All those are direct bill things to HHS, so we'll just be paying those directly.
Right.
Okay, but this whole thing about this outlier, we talked about this for a minute. The whole thing about these outliers is it proves the point that if somebody needs more, then there needs to be some sort of assessment and system in place that funds that, so that the outlier is not all state dollars, that it's in a rate that we can match. Because that would mean that all this money that's sitting on the sideline going to outliers is not matched by federal funds, by Medicaid funds. So what we want to do is, yes, we're going to have to build that system into where we've got acuity-based rates, so that if someone says, you know, this person requires this much care, we have an objective assessment that tells us that's what they need. We set the rate around that so we can bill for it, versus this is our arbitrary band, the best we can do, but you know, you need more, so we'll just give you some state dollars to cover it. I think that's leaving too much money sitting on the table.
And it's also depleting the state of money where they shouldn't be depleted of, when they should be helping, the federal government should be helping, and that's the way to get there.
That's what that's for. So remember when the state gives us dollars, they're anticipating us, because we always give them that 30% of state dollars. They're anticipating us pulling down that 70.
Exactly.
So, okay.
So, any other questions? Would then entertain a motion to approve the proposed outlier funding modifications.
So moved, Barry Malver, so moves.
Do we have a second? Stephanie?
Yes.
Any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Let the record reflect that passed unanimously. Chris, next item, the state auditor report.
Yes, annually we have the state auditor come and visit us, and they do what's called an agreed upon procedures engagement. We are in the state's audited financial statements as a column in their comprehensive annual financial report, or their CAFR is what it's referred to. So we don't actually go through an audit per se as an agency. We're just part of the state's overall audit, but then they send the state auditor office in to do some deep dive procedures, utilizing agreed upon procedures type engagement. And we just completed those procedures for June 2019. They typically do that in like February after the year's over. So we'll have, for example, June 2020s will start, after Christmas sometime, and conclude after the next fiscal year's even over. So we have like 2 years going on at once in finance when this is happening. So based on those procedures, there are very small, minor things they found. One thing I will note that in a financial statement audit, you have a concept of materiality where you don't report little tiny stuff because it's just really insignificant. With the agreed upon procedures, even though we're an $800 million organization, they're reporting stuff that is over $1,000, for example, adjustment or issue. But if you scan through the report, you'll see just a few comments or recommendations, and we did very, very well, and I want to give kudos to our staff for all they do. This is a fairly high-level review, in my opinion, of, they don't review our summary financials, but they're digging in pretty detailed in actual transactions like payroll and AP transactions and capital assets and so forth. So I'll presenting this to the commission. I don't know if y'all typically formally approve our corrective actions, but we have submitted a corrective action plan. I don't know if that's in your packet or not, though.
I don't think the corrective, is it? Corrective action.
You can see the draft of that.
Yeah, because it's gotta be approved by your office. Yeah, it's in here.
I just know it was emailed to me. I don't have a packet per se. So maybe we need to table this and put it on the next agenda if we don't have the actual corrective action document in here.
You're right.
Let's
You
not
sent
miss
me
it.
the actual document. I don't see it in the packet, Chris.
Can we just table, can I make a motion to table that till the next?
Yeah.
Yep. Motion to table this pending getting the corrective action plan. Do we have a
You know what?
second?
We'll go ahead and send it out to you because it's done. Yeah.
Second from Stephanie. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that is,
Barry Malvers made the motion, just so you know.
thank you for clarifying that, Commissioner Hoffman. So we'll table that up. Chris, I think that does it for you then.
Yes, sir.
Yes, you can now return back to your isolation. Next item on the agenda is the suggested waiver service, Commissioner Malvers.
None of you probably know, but I have actually been riding horses for about 22 years in standard AQHA classes. But when I was a very young child, a lady who had just heard of something called therapeutic riding helped me out for a few years when I was about 7 or 8 years old, whenever therapeutic riding was a very, very, in the early 70s, whenever therapeutic riding was a very, very new thing. And it started in Colorado, and I'm not going to take much of your time. I could take a long time, but I'm not going to. I was just going to ask that the staff be, ask the staff to review the possibility of incorporating hippo, what they call, some places call it hippotherapy, some therapeutic riding, into one of our waiver renewals. It needs to be, we do our waiver renewals, and this is for people with developmental disabilities and related disabilities. And there are 4 states right now that I know of, at least 5. One of them is Colorado, which is where this all started. Another is Montana, another is Louisiana, and another is Pennsylvania, where therapeutic riding is incorporated into a waiver. And it would be done through what's called the Professional Association of Therapeutic Horsemanship International. You have to have a certification if you're a therapeutic riding center. If you have a certification through them, then you're nationally certified. And I would recommend that, of course, the ones we use be nationally certified, but they are all over our state. And I would like to see us investigate the possibility of having a waiver. And just to give you an idea, the one in Columbia is called Zoom Riders, which I've been privileged to donate to for many years. So, personally to for many years. So I just would ask, I would just make a motion that we ask staff to investigate that and to make me the point person regarding that entire situation. If nobody on the commission objects, I probably know a little more about that than most. So, go ahead.
So we have a motion from Commissioner Malpris, a second from Commissioner Rollinson with regard.
My daughter has used that program. I was a horseback person myself, with several world championships, and, so I wholeheartedly support that program, this program.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that should be investigated by staff. Thank you, Commissioner Malpris, for bringing that.
State Director's report.
Yeah, well,
Most of it is done, I think, ain't it?
Well, I want it in the record, to be perfectly honest, so I want to be able to attach my report to the record.
Okay.
I want to acknowledge our deepest appreciation for our direct support professionals at the regional centers and all community programs, our DSPs. Continue to provide for all those folks being supported in our residential programs across the state. All hands have been on deck as coverage has to be maintained. Care needs to be given in the face of an invisible threat. The community day programs are giving their all to open and support those individuals living at home with family or independently. Job coaches are working hard, getting their folks actively working and earning again. I want to thank everybody for everything they do. COVID update, we keep our regional center numbers on our website. Right now, we have 0 of 650 residents in the 14-day CDC quarantine window. 2 of the 1,500 staff are in the 14-day CDC quarantine window, and all 40 buildings are clear with no quarantine limitations. We have no residents or staff in the hospital. We have implemented visitation at the regional centers under current strict DHEC guidelines. As far as the community goes, their 2-week residential trend, we have 18 new resident cases, but it is a declining trend. And the 2-week staff trend, we have 30 staff cases, and that again too is a declining trend. This is a hot topic around the state, the Senate plan for state employee bonuses. The Senate Finance Committee proposed a budget that includes $20 million to help cover $1,000 bonuses for more than 14,000 frontline state employees who earn $50,000 or less as of September 1st and have to physically report to work most, if not all days of the week during the virus pandemic. When asked for our numbers, the BDSN provided numbers for our staff as well as the community provider staff, which is one of the reasons we need their FTE numbers. This is an example of what we use that for. This proposal for utilizing, this is not a proposal for utilizing the one-time COVID-19 relief account, a separate spending plan made up of money from the Federal CARES Act, but the plan was not cleared by the state's third-party vetting. Apparently, when you're asking for COVID money, they have a third-party vendor that looks through this to vet that is an appropriate expense from that account. The monies from that account would have to go to those who work directly with those who are infected with the virus. It could not go to employees who simply had to report to work, which is one of the reasons in our request, we included it in our request to the state government when they asked us about monies from this account. Because our people, when we gave those bonuses, it was only to people who worked with people who were sick. Again, that was just the Senate Finance Committee. Then it has to go to the full Senate. They're going to be beginning a debate on that proposed budget. If it makes it over that hurdle, it has to go back to the House, and the House has to back it. So this is nowhere near a done deal. Okay, and finally, after hearing Kyla talk about the OIG report, I want to ensure all new commissioners that when the OIG came into the state, it was reported by Interim Director Malley, and I made a couple of reports as kind of like a significant thing happened where they were asking for names and cases, and now we're moving down that road and we're winding down. So that's another reason why we brought it back to the commission's attention. Now that we're starting to wind down the review process, we have learned a few things about our current system. Things that we already identified have started we've started the process of correcting. The bad news is that the OIG final report, when it comes out, is going to be negative. As it has been in every state, it has been completed. However, the good news came when I started listening to a CMS webinar last week regarding their 5 top recommendations for a state to develop a good incident management system. It was great to hear that of those 5 recommendations, we were actively working on every single one of them. So we do not only have a well-rounded corrective action plan to hand to DHHS, but we have already begun to implement it. The report will be negative, but my optimism regarding the team we are putting together to round out our QA capabilities is high. We have renamed the department QA department as risk management. Excuse me. Love my science medicine. We know that we have discussed on more than one occasion that our quality management process focused solely on measurement. We all know, however, that simply measuring a problem is just one step in solving it. It does not solve itself. We need to rebuild DDSN's capabilities to provide technical assistance, train providers, and investigate incidents as they occur. We knew when we started our reorganization of the agency that form and function needed to be realigned. Silos of information had to be knocked down, and we had to take a critical look at our own procedures to see where the agency needed to improve quality. So we're not only looking outside about quality, we're looking inside about quality. This will be an ongoing process, but we have been able to redeploy FTEs into the risk management, formerly QA. We have discontinued long-standing contracts which were not adding value to our mission to help fund this effort. Kyla Schultz, who you met, comes from us from Pennsylvania and brings a wealth of knowledge. And she's so good about organizing these things. We call them buckets here at DDSN into the proper bucket. We are well on our way to filling out our risk management needs with folks who have established work history in community programs. Back to those 5 CMS recommendations, which you've already begun, which have already been identified by our folks and are well underway in down the path of working on them. And they're all multi-year solutions. They are not something that can happen overnight. Number 1 was develop a standardized and clear definition of reportable incidents. We cannot confuse people as to what is reportable. We are currently working on this as we rewrite directives and standards. And we'll need to do all this in preparation for number 2, which is establish a system of robust oversight that is clear, concise, and actionable. Replace outdated technology for increased data collection and ease of access to the data. Our homegrown IAM system is outdated and not flexible. We also need a system that can go through Medicaid hospitalization codes so we can back into double checking to make sure things are reported to us appropriately. We need to develop a comprehensive quality improvement strategy that leverages the state agency as well as our case management network. We're well down this path. We are getting to the point where we're probably going to have to establish a work session with our commission to really start looking at how all these pieces fit together. We went through a lot to get to fee-for-service with our case management. And to do that, we also established more contact from our case managers to the families as a requirement. Now what we need to do is, now that we've increased our visits, we've done the person-centered planning training, and we've got fee-for-service in there, we need to marshal those case managers into the quality improvement fight, because that's what monitorship is about. Their monitorship is crucial to improving quality and accountability. They will require a great deal of training to get them there, and probably we are in the process of building them some tools to help them do that. We need to use our data that we're having to drive our training modules. So as we see things in our quality improvement efforts, whether it's an Alliant review or it's an incident that happens in the community, that we use all that data to actually develop what training modules we need to move our community and our regional center individuals forward and then give our staff the tools they need to actually do their job. And finally, I'm trying to do this really quickly. Finally, I want to thank Sandra Delaney. I need to say something to her. I hope she's still listening. As Sandra leaves us to enjoy her hard-earned retirement, I want to say to her, thank you. Thank you for being so welcoming and a source of sage counsel and incredible support. Making the transition from a provider and one who frequently engaged in intense discussions with DDSN to the leader of DDSN was a daunting proposition. Sandra's calm demeanor and reassuring words greatly helped me in that transition. She was kind enough to get to know me, give me the benefit of the doubt from the start, and work with me to build a team here at DDSN. I am forever in her debt.
Any questions regarding the state director?
Yeah, let's give Sandra a round.
Sorry, more acronym problem. CMS stands for what, the recommendation?
The Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services. Some people call it CMMS. Most of the time, it's just called CMS.
That's the Atlanta group.
It's the federal group, but our regional centers in Atlanta, yeah.
And I just call them the big dogs in Atlanta.
Called Medicaid.
I was just, yeah, I don't want to add that, but I'm glad he did.
I was trying to think of a good way to say it. Till we start talking about dogs. Anyway, okay, so, on that being said, any other questions for regards to the executive session, the executive director? All right, seeing none, there are two matters for executive session this particular time. One is a contractual issue, one is a personnel matter. Would entertain a motion to enter into executive session to discuss those two items at this time.
Question, Chairman.
Yes.
That, is this staff included or is this with
So
us?
it's one is with staff, one is primarily without staff, although we can certainly call in staff as needed.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah,
I so move to go into executive session, discuss these two allowed FOIA matters.
Second.
That was Thomas and Blackwood. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take 5 minutes to everybody to get up and move around a little bit, and then we're gonna go in at that point.
And then come back in the
Stay
session.
here.
No, yeah, I mean, yeah, we're taking a quick break, but we're gonna stay in here.
Yes.
So Mr. Chairman, I can't go to my automobile now.
You can't go your, yeah, it's fine to go, yeah, restroom, that's.
Like red spot.